So I was the oldest of 7 kids. And so as the oldest, when my parents went out to do something, I was often the first person they would ask to babysit, right? Makes sense, save some money. And as I was babysitting, whenever I had to lay the law down, it's time to go to bed, time to pick up your toys, whatever, invariably, one of my siblings would respond with something like, "You're not my dad. You're not my boss. You're just one of us." And they were right in one sense, right? I'm not their dad. I'm not their boss. But because dad wasn't there, because mom wasn't there, I had to, in a sense, be the parent in their place. But all of my authority came from the fact that my parents had given it to me. I didn't have anything in it myself. I was just one of the siblings. But because my parents had said, "You're in charge now," that meant that I was in charge. Now, the reason I mention this is because today, God is very clear that all of the authority that is exercised on earth comes, in a sense, borrowed from Him. He says, "Give ear, you that rule over multitudes, and boast of many nations. For your dominion was given you from the Lord, and your sovereignty from the Most High." So every earthly ruler, every prime minister, every president, every king draws their authority borrowed from God. And this can seem somewhat strange when we look out at the world and we see tons of leaders that are seemingly in direct opposition to God and His will. We see countries where the leaders are brutalizing their own people, oppressing the poor, living these rich lives, stealing from their own people, from their own nations. We see countries where the leaders turn a blind eye to evils like human trafficking that is rampant going on because it's seen as a benefit to tourism, to their countries. We see countries where the leaders and the governments are actively persecuting the church, arresting, torturing, killing Christians because of their faith. Even in our own country, we see political leaders that are passing legislation that is against the sanctity of human life, that is celebrating and promoting sexual immorality. What's going on? What's going on? Where is this abuse of authority headed? Well, I think that the reading today actually gives us a sense of hope, because God will have the final say. He is still king. Authority still belongs to Him. And it says, "He will come upon you terribly and swiftly, because severe judgment falls on those in high places." He goes on and says, "A strict inquiry is in store for the mighty." Make no mistake, Jesus will have the final say. He will judge all those who He has given authority to rule on earth. If they do not rule according to His will, if they contradict God, if they lead their nations in sin and in wickedness away from the Lord, they will not escape judgment. And this is not something that we celebrate or rejoice in, right? Because all of us are going to face judgment one day. But all of the wicked leaders throughout history that have persecuted the church, that have abused their people, all of them one day had to come before Jesus at the end of their life, and He paid them in full for what they did or did not do. Conversely, those who led their nations well, who exercised good character, who led their people closer to the Lord, who ruled and legislated according to God's will, they will be blessed. They will be rewarded in the life to come. And this is something that we can take hope in when we look out at the unfairness and the injustice of it all. Like, why? Why is this happening? Jesus is still in control. Jesus is still sovereign. God is king, and God will not be mocked. And He will execute perfect judgment on everyone, including those who lead nations. And it's also, I think, a call to all of us to pray for our leaders, to pray hard for them. It's not easy to lead. It's especially not easy to lead whole nations, whole governments. Pray for your leaders. Pray if they are seemingly in opposition to God, pray for their conversion. Pray that their hearts would be softened. Pray that they would have their eyes opened to see the goodness of God's law, and pray that they would have the courage to then bring that law into the nations that they administer. We can pray for our own world leaders and leaders of all the nations around the world. We can pray that through them, God's will could be brought to the people that they serve, and that whole nations can learn to walk in the ways of God, who is King over all.